The database returned in 11 seconds. 0 results. I ran it again. 0. I ran it a third time because I had to. Because the alternative, the thing I'd have to explain to my lieutenant and then to the county ME and then possibly to a judge someday, was something I wasn't ready to say out loud yet. The third time 0. His name was Eliot Marsh, 54 years old, senior forensic accountant at Carver Falls Regional Bank, where he had worked for 22 years. He had passed 7 federal background checks in that time. His fingerprints were on file with the state licensing board, with the county clerk's office, and with the bank's own security contractor. He was a homeowner, a taxpayer, a husband of 19 years. He had been dead for 5 days when I ran his prints. And according to every fingerprint database in the United States, federal, state, and county, Eliot Marsh did not exist. I want to be precise about what that means because it's easy to hear not in the database and think clerical error, old record, technical glitch. I thought all of those things. I checked all of those things. What I found instead was this: the record existed. The entry was there. You could see the file date, 1998, the registration number, the data fields. Every field was blank. Someone had gone into the system and removed the data while leaving the shell. It wasn't an absence. It was an erasure. Someone had erased him. The question I couldn't stop turning over: on the drive home that night, in the kitchen making coffee I didn't drink, in the parking lot of the county building at 7 the next morning, was whether Eliot had done it himself, or whether someone had done it for him. To understand what I found, I have to take you back, not to the night he died, not yet. First, I have to tell you who Eliot Marsh was, or who he appeared to be, because in this case, those two things are not the same. His wife's name is Margaret. She goes by Maggie. She's a high school music teacher, choral director, and she has one of those voices that sounds calm even when she's talking about things that aren't calm at all. When I first interviewed her, 6 days after Eliot's funeral, she walked me through their house with a kind of deliberate steadiness, like she was narrating someone else's life. I recognized it. Grief does that sometimes. It gives people a strange, temporary precision. She described Eliot as a quiet man, not cold. She was careful to say that, but contained. He held things carefully, she said, like he was always aware of the weight of things. He liked cooking on Sundays. He read history. He kept a small garden out back. Tomatoes and herbs, nothing dramatic. He'd been the same way for all 19 years of their marriage. He's steady, reliable, present in the way that good, careful people are present. He remembered birthdays. He fixed things when they broke. He called her from work when he said he would. There was nothing. She told me that she would have called a red flag, and I believed her. I think she was telling the absolute truth from inside a life that was built, at least in part, to make sure she never saw one. His colleague at the bank, Dennis Falk, had known Eliot for 14 years. They ate lunch together most Fridays at the same diner 2 blocks from the bank. Dennis is a careful man himself, the kind of person who pauses before he speaks, who chooses his words like he's arranging something fragile. He was precise, Dennis told me, almost too precise. You know how most people, when they're working through a number problem, they'll think out loud a little, make a mistake, catch it, move on. Eliot never did that. He would go quiet, work through it completely in his head, and then give you the answer. Always right. I used to joke that he was running a different program than the rest of us. He said it as a compliment. I wrote it down as something else. I keep coming back to one thing Maggie said during that first interview. She was sorting through some of his personal items. A small wooden box he'd kept on the bookshelf in his study. And she found a keyring she didn't recognize. It wasn't on his regular key ring with the house keys and the car and the lockbox in the garage. It was separate. A single key, small and old, made of brass, worn smooth at the top where a thumb would rest against it. She held it up and looked at it for a moment. Then she looked at me. "I don't know what this opens," she said. "I've never seen it before." I bagged it. I didn't tell her then what I suspected, which was that it was probably nothing, or probably everything, and I had no way yet to know which. She almost threw it away before I came over that morning. She told me that later she'd had it in the trash bag and then took it back out. She couldn't say why. "It felt like something he'd want kept," she said. "That key sat on my desk for 11 days before I understood what it was." October 14th was a Tuesday. Eliot had come home from work at his usual time. Maggie estimated around 6:15, maybe 6:20. She wasn't watching the clock. He'd made dinner. Pasta, something with chicken. She said he'd been experimenting with a new sauce. They ate together at the kitchen table. He asked how her rehearsals were going. The choir had a concert coming up in November. She said he seemed fine, relaxed even, not distracted. Around 80:30, he said he had some work to finish. A client report, something routine. He kissed her on the cheek, went into his study, and closed the door. At 11:40 p.m., Maggie knocked to say goodnight. He didn't answer. She opened the door. The county medical examiner ruled it a cardiac event, sudden, likely painless, consistent with a pre-existing arterial condition that Eliot had apparently never been diagnosed with or never disclosed. No signs of struggle, no bruising, no trauma, no indication of anything other than a man whose heart stopped while he was sitting in his chair. His coffee cup was still half full and not quite cold. He was 54 years old. People die at 54. It happens. The medical examiner signed the death certificate. The funeral home came, and Eliot Marsh was buried 6 days later in Carver Falls Municipal Cemetery under a clear October sky. What nobody knew yet, what I wouldn't know for another 9 days, was the detail that changed the shape of everything. When I was assigned to review the file, a routine flag from the life insurance company's own fraud prevention process, which caught the fingerprint anomaly before I did. I requested everything: the initial reports, the ME's notes, the scene photographs, and tucked into the evidence inventory, filed under electronic items, no forensic interest, was a single line that I read twice. The desktop computer in the study had been factory reset. A full wipe, everything gone. The IT contractor who logged it noted it as manual initiation, user triggered, the timestamp on the wipe on 12 p.m. The medical examiner placed Eliot's time of death between 10:45 and 11:30 p.m. based on body temperature and the cooling coffee. At 11:12, if the ME was right, Eliot Marsh was either dying or already dead. And yet his computer wiped itself. I've asked 3 IT consultants about this since then. All 3 said the same thing: you can schedule a wipe in advance, set it to trigger at a specific time. You can also trigger it remotely if you have the right credentials. What you cannot do, what is not possible, is initiate a wipe on a local machine while you are actively experiencing cardiac arrest. Someone wiped that computer, whether it was Eliot before he died or someone else with remote access. I don't know. I have not been able to answer that question. I'm not sure I ever will. Maggie still makes 2 cups of coffee every morning. She told me this herself about 6 weeks after Eliot died. Not as something sad, the way people sometimes perform their grief for investigators, but as a simple observation. "My hands just do it," she said. "I reach for 2 mugs and I've already filled them before I remember." She'd been pouring the second one down the drain every morning for 6 weeks. She said she wasn't sure when she'd stop. I thought about that image for a long time. The coffee going down the drain. The muscle memory of a life lived alongside someone, outlasting the person. Whatever Eliot had kept from her, and he had kept things, I was already certain of that. She had loved him. That part, at least, was real. The employment file at Carver Falls Regional Bank went back to April 1998. That was when Eliot Marsh started. Junior accountant, worked his way up. Every performance review was strong. Every compliance check was clean. The bank had conducted 7 background verifications on him over 22 years, and every one had come back clear. I called the HR director and asked who had done the original 1998 verification. She told me a firm called Verantis Background Services. I looked them up. Verantis Background Services had dissolved in 2001. I want to tell you what it feels like to follow a trail like this, because it's not what you might expect. It doesn't feel like discovery. It feels like subtraction. Every lead you follow removes one more piece of the picture you thought you had, until you're standing in front of a frame with nothing in it. The state licensing board had Eliot's prints on file since 1999. Blank data fields, same as the federal database. His college, the university listed on his resume, had a record of a student by that name. Sparse an enrollment date, a graduation year, one listed major. No transcripts, no photograph in the yearbook from that year. No record of campus housing, activity, or billing address. I called the registrar's office 3 times. The third time, a woman who had worked there for 30 years told me gently that records from that era were sometimes incomplete. She meant it kindly. She had no idea what she was telling me. It was like someone had drawn a silhouette of a life and left all the detail out. If you're watching this for the first time, stick with me. What I'm about to tell you is the part that changes the whole shape of this case. And if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I don't say that lightly. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. There are 2 or 3 cases I've been sitting on that I think you'll want to be here for. The motel was 63 miles from Carver Falls. The Pinewood Motor Lodge, on a state road that doesn't lead anywhere particularly, between 2 small towns that aren't quite small enough to be charming. I drove out there on a Wednesday in November, 3 weeks into the investigation. The manager, Rosa Tells, who has run the place since her father left it to her in 2009, was behind the desk when I came in. I showed her a photograph of Eliot Marsh. It was from his bank employee ID, taken about 4 years before he died. She recognized him immediately. Didn't hesitate. "That's Mr. Cole," she said. His name at the motel was Cole. No first name on the registration, just Cole, and a license plate number that came back to a vehicle registered to a shell company out of Nevada, which no longer existed. He had been coming to the Pinewood Motor Lodge for 8 years, always on the last Sunday of the month. Always room 6, which Rosa had more or less held for him after the first year, because he always asked for it, and she liked the consistency. Always paid in cash, always left by 4 p.m., never made calls from the room, never had food delivered, never had a visitor, not once in 8 years, not that Rosa saw. He was polite, she told me, quiet. He'd say good morning, he'd thank me for the room, he'd leave it clean. He tipped $50 every time he checked out. She paused. I always thought he was maybe going through something personal. People come here when they need to be somewhere that isn't where they usually are. She thought about it another moment. I never asked. It wasn't my business. I asked her if anyone had ever come asking about him. She said 3 days before he died, a man had come into the lobby, middle-aged. She didn't recognize him. He'd asked if a man named Cole stayed there, described him accurately. She'd said she couldn't give out information about guests. The man had thanked her and left. She had thought nothing of it at the time. She thought about it now. I asked what the man looked like. Careful, she said. And then, when I waited, He looked careful, like he was watching himself. I've tried to find him. I have not found him. There was one other thing about room 6. I almost didn't include it because I don't know what to do with it, and I still don't. On the windowsill, on the inside ledge, where the paint was worn thin from years of hands resting there, a single rubber band, old, dried out, the kind that would snap if you touched it. Rosa said it wasn't hers. The cleaning log showed the room had been turned over twice since Eliot's last visit. Nobody logged it as found property because who logs a rubber band? I took it. It's in an evidence bag somewhere. I think about it more than I should. What was Eliot Marsh doing at a Motel 60? 3 miles from home, alone, once a month, for 8 years. I have asked myself this question more times than I can count. In the early weeks, I thought an affair. It would explain the secrecy, the cash, the regularity of it. But there was no other person. Rosa was certain of that. And a man conducting an affair does not, generally, wipe his hard drive before he dies. I thought therapy, maybe, something he was ashamed of, some appointment he kept private. But there's no therapist within 20 miles of that motel who had ever heard of him. I thought he was meeting someone who came to him, not someone he went to see. Someone who left before Rosa noticed or came to the window. But the room showed nothing. I had it checked. 8 years of monthly visits, and room 6 had no prints on file that weren't Rosa's cleaning staff and a ghost named Cole. I don't know what he was doing there. That absence, that blank Sunday afternoon at the end of every month, is the part of this case I find most disturbing, not because of what it implies, because of how completely it resists all of them. The key. 11 days after Maggie gave it to me, I found the lock. It took a locksmith, and then a second locksmith, and then a call to a manufacturer's representative in Ohio who specialized in older domestic security hardware. The key was from a production run made between 1989 and 1996, used primarily by small regional banks and credit unions for their safety deposit boxes. I compiled a list of every institution within a 200-mile radius that had used that hardware and still existed. There were 23 of them. I called all 23. Millhaven Trust was a 41-mile drive from Carver Falls. A small bank. 6 employees, a single branch, the kind of institution that sponsors youth soccer leagues and prints its mission statement on paper bags at the local fair. The branch manager, a woman named Patricia, had been there for 17 years. She looked at the key. She looked at the number stamped on the side. She went to the back. She came back with a record card. Safety deposit box number 44. Registered March 2003. Name on the registration, E. Hargrove. E. Hargrove had never come in after the initial registration. The box had been accessed exactly once, the day it was opened in March of 2003, and not again in the 20 years since. Patricia said the account was current. The annual fee had been paid every year in cash sent by mail. The last payment had arrived 6 weeks before Eliot's death. We opened the box. It was empty. Not dusty empty, not the empty of something that was never used. The forensics team noted fresh scratching on the interior metal, hairline marks consistent with items being removed recently and quickly, not carefully. Something had been taken out of that box, and not long ago. Within weeks of Eliot's death, possibly within days. There was no record of anyone accessing it. The bank's camera system only archived 30 days, and 30 days had passed. Patricia checked with every employee. Nobody remembered anyone coming in to access a safety deposit box around that time. Nobody. I sat in the parking lot of Millhaven Trust for a while after we were done. I have a habit I've never been able to break. I talk to myself on cases quietly in the car when something isn't adding up. I said out loud, he was hiding from something. And then I said, or hiding something for someone. And then I said, because I was tired and it was getting dark and Patricia had made me a cup of coffee I'd barely touched, or both. It was the third one that stayed with me on the drive back. I'm going to lay out the two possibilities here, and I want you to actually think about this because they are both real and they are both supported by the evidence. And I have spent months trying to find a third one, and I can't. If you have a theory, put it in the comments. I've had people in this community catch things I missed. Let me know what you think. The first possibility, the one I kept coming back to in the early weeks, is that Eliot Marsh was living under protection. Not necessarily a federal program, though that's one version of it. Maybe a private arrangement, maybe something more informal, a network, an organization that helps people disappear from situations that would otherwise kill them. Domestic violence, organized crime exposure, witness testimony. People do this. They build new lives, new names, new paper trails. Sometimes there are handlers. Sometimes the handlers check in. The monthly visits to the Pinewood Motor Lodge, last Sunday of every month, always the same room, always cash, start to look different through this lens. It's not like a man going somewhere private for his own reasons.
Yeah.
A man keeping an appointment, a check-in, proof of life in the old-fashioned sense. The kind of arrangement you maintain, not because you want to, but because it's the condition of the life you chose. The box at Millhaven Trust, under the name E. Hargrove, would have held documents, a real identity, records of whoever he'd been before 1998, proof that might protect him or expose him, depending on who found it. Someone found it, and if that person had been looking for Eliot Marsh long enough to finally locate him, and if Eliot's death, officially a cardiac event, was perhaps assisted in some way that a county ME, without a specific reason to look, wouldn't have detected, then what we have is not a cold case. What we have is a murder made to look ordinary. A life ended at the precise moment someone decided the silence was over. But here's the other reading, because it fits. I have to tell you it fits. Eliot Marsh was a forensic accountant. He spent 22 years at a regional bank with intimate knowledge of how money moves, where it hides, and how to make both of those things invisible. He was precise, Dennis said, almost too precise. He ran a different program. What if the program he was running was his own? What if Eliot Marsh, or whoever Eliot Marsh had been before 1998, had built his life inside the bank not as a civilian, but as an operator, moving money for someone, using his position, his expertise, his clean record to keep something flowing that was never supposed to be visible. The monthly motel visits in this reading are handoffs, or accounting sessions, or meetings with someone who came and went from room 6 through a window Rosa never watched. Because Rosa, and I believe this, Rosa is not part of this. Rosa assumed he was a sad, private man with somewhere else to be. The box held ledgers, evidence of accounts, proof of crimes that implicated not just Eliot, but the people he worked for, the people who needed him compliant and alive until they didn't. When he died, or was made to die, someone emptied the box before the evidence inside it could surface. The man who visited Rosa 3 days before the death wasn't looking for Eliot out of concern. He was confirming an address. I don't know which of these is true. I've sat with both of them for a long time now, and I want to tell you that one of them feels more right to me, but that would be the wrong thing to say. Because I have learned in this work that what feels right and what is true are often as different as two people in the same room who never introduced themselves. What I know is this: a man lived a life that was not entirely his in a city that didn't know him for at least 26 years. He was careful and he was kind and he made pasta on Tuesdays and he kept a key on a ring that no one in his house had ever seen. He went somewhere once a month for 8 years and he told no one. And then he died. And the thing he'd kept in a box, under a name that wasn't his name, in a bank 41 miles from home, was gone before anyone thought to look. The case is officially still open. Eliot's death remains listed as natural causes. There is no evidence that rises to the standard required to reclassify it, which is one of the stranger facts I live with. A man with no verified identity, a wiped hard drive, a secret box, and a stranger who came looking 3 days before he died. And officially, Eliot Marsh died of a heart attack. The paperwork says so. I went back to see Maggie once more in January. She had gone back to teaching by then. Rehearsals again, the spring concert. She said it helped. The kids, the noise, the ordinary pressure of getting 43 teenagers to hold a note together. I asked her again about the key, whether she'd ever seen Eliot with anything like it. She shook her head. Then she was quiet for a moment. He had things he kept to himself, she said. I knew that. I think I always knew that. I told myself it was just how he was. Some people need that space. She looked out the window at the garden. He'd planted it. She'd kept it up this fall, she said, more or less. I used to think that was something I understood about him. Now I think I was understanding something about myself. 2 weeks after that conversation, Maggie called me. She'd been clearing out the study in stages. Not all at once, she said, because all at once was too much. She'd found something taped to the underside of the bottom desk drawer. A small envelope, white, no writing on the outside. Inside a photograph, a young man, maybe 20 or 22 years old, standing outside a building she didn't recognize. Brick, institutional, looking, somewhere that could have been a college or a municipal office or 100 other things. The photo was old, the quality, the color saturation, the way the edges had yellowed slightly. On the back, in handwriting she recognized as Eliot's before 1998. She thought, she told me, after looking at it for a long time, she thought it might be him. Younger, before she knew him. The eyes were similar, she said, but the face was harder to be sure of. It was a young man who hadn't quite settled into himself yet. The way young men sometimes look before life arranges their features into something permanent. I had the photo analyzed, forensic facial comparison. 61% likelihood of match to known photographs of Eliot Marsh. Not enough to confirm, not enough to dismiss. I submitted the young man's face to missing persons databases. One partial match came back, a report filed in 1997, a state 300 miles away. A young man named David Creel, 22 years old, who had left his apartment on a March afternoon and was never reported seen again. No foul play was ever suspected. He was just gone, filed as a voluntary disappearance. Because there was no evidence otherwise, David Creel had brown eyes. Eliot Marsh had brown eyes. I couldn't confirm it. I can't confirm it now. The match was 61%. 3 weeks into the investigation, mid-November, I remember because it was already cold and I'd been driving a lot, someone called the office. My direct line. They let it ring once, then left a message when it went to voicemail. You're looking in the wrong direction. That was it. The full message. I traced the call to a payphone in a city 3 states away. Payphones are rare enough now that I thought I might get camera footage from nearby businesses. The footage showed a figure, a person, couldn't determine gender at that distance, standing at the phone for about 45 seconds, then walking away, going into a street full of people. Gone. That was the only contact. I've heard nothing since. I've thought about what it means to build a life on silence. Not on lies exactly, or not only lies, but on the deliberate, sustained practice of not saying, of knowing what questions are coming and shaping yourself into the kind of person those questions don't land on. Eliot Marsh was loved. Maggie loved him. Dennis Falk considered him a friend. The neighbors I spoke to, 3 of them, on a quiet street where people noticed each other but didn't pry, described him as a good neighbor. reliable, decent. Someone who shoveled the walk in winter without being asked. That doesn't stop being true because he had a secret. I've had to remind myself of that more than once in this case. A person can be genuinely kind and genuinely dangerous at the same time. A person can love someone truly and still maintain a door they never open in a room at the back of themselves and keep it locked with a key they wear on a ring no one has ever seen. The safety deposit box is still registered under the name E. Hargrove. Patricia at Millhaven Trust called me in March to confirm she'd received the annual fee payment. Cash, mailed, same as always. Same postmark as the year before. I don't know who is paying it. I don't know what they expect to put back in it, or what they're waiting for. That's the part I come back to in the end. Not the fingerprints, not the motel, not the photograph of a young man who might be someone named David Creel. Those are questions about identity, about who Eliot Marsh was before we knew him and what that means. The box is a question about now. Someone is still paying for an empty box under a dead man's alias in a small bank on a state road in the middle of nowhere. Every year, on time, in cash. I don't know if they're maintaining something or waiting for it to become safe to use. Eliot Marsh is buried in Carver Falls Municipal Cemetery. No one came forward after his death to claim any connection to him. No family, no old friends, no one who said they had known him before 1998. Maggie is still there, still teaching, still clearing out the study in stages. She kept the photograph. She told me she decided not to try to find out who the young man in it was. He wanted to be Eliot, she said. I think I should let him. If this case stayed with you, if you found yourself turning it over the way I have, the way I still do, subscribe. It helps more than you know. There's another case I've been sitting with for a few months that I think is ready, and it starts somewhere you wouldn't expect. Next week. I'll see you then. I asked Claire Weston, the investigator who has carried this case longer than anyone else, whether she thought she'd ever close it. She didn't answer right away. She looked at her coffee, then at the window. Some cases, she said finally, are questions about what happened. This one is a question about what a person is. She left it there. So will I.